All right, let's dive in to our first matchup, which was the Gonzaga and Baylor matchup. Went down to the wire in the end. It was an interesting game from the standpoint of Drew Timme didn't have a field goal attempt in the first half. He only scored at the foul line. He only had 6 attempts this whole entire game, which was the lowest of the season. RC, what was Baylor doing defensively to disrupt him?
Yeah, I want to give a ton of credit to Baylor defensively, and we said that during the Texas game. I just don't think they're doing enough to get him the ball. I think they got a free-flowing offense. I think since his time there, they obviously hadn't been forcing him the ball, and I get it. But if this team is going to beat some of these elite teams, they can't allow guard pressure and a lack of – and I don't even want to say point guard play because I think they got options of doing that, of getting the ball. There's no excuse for him not to get the ball in the scoring area as much as he has this year to me, and that's why they're struggling. So I want to give credit. Baylor guard stepped up, made plays, and they're a good defensive team. Don't get me wrong, but nobody's that good to stop Drew Timme from getting the ball. He's too talented. I don't see a concerted effort as much to just force him getting him the ball. I know the ball's got to move, but I'm just surprised in watching him play that too much time goes by in critical moments of the game and the ball don't touch his hand. And if it does, it's on a three-point line where he's reversing it, getting into a ball screen. He's one of the best low post players, if not the best low post player in college basketball. He's got to get the ball. I mean, there's times a night I'm looking at his numbers myself saying, man, throw him the ball. Teams are switching five. He has guards on him, and he's not getting the ball. So, I mean, Baylor played great defense, don't get me wrong, but we all know, your best player got to get the ball. There's no way you're beating anybody, let alone Baylor or any other good team, when your best player gets 6 shots. And their defense was not that good for him only to get 6 shots.
A Baylor defense, by the way, that led up 94 points or
Right.
something like that to Marquette
Right.
earlier this week.
No, I can't. I don't know what you saw, Coach. I just don't believe that you can do that.
Well, do
Particularly switching.
you want to talk about his fifth foul?
Oh,
Dusty was
that's
here. Like
terrible.
we would dive into that and we get into the officials and man, like that's the one thing too. We always go back to the monitor. We can check, whose possession is. We can check the time on the clock. We can check all these different things. But that to be his fifth foul with the game on the line and him to be on the bench in that situation, I thought that was extremely unfortunate. I agree with RC in terms of just getting him the ball, getting him touches. When he was in the game down the stretch, they ran the ball screen. He caught it in the lane, hit the little float of the runner right at the halo. But yeah, they've got to find ways to just get him more touches. But to me, Smith turnover. He goes out on the break. They go up 7, and it's almost like everybody that was associated with the Gonzaga's program. I keep saying Gonzaga. All the Gonzaga fans get mad at me because I don't pronounce it the right way. Okay, so we're just going to make sure
And
we pronounce it the right way.
They do get mad about it. It's
They
true.
get very, very mad. They tweet at me. They get upset. I feel like I'm back dealing with UMass fans on Twitter. But when Malachi Smith gets the dunk and they go up 7 under 2 minutes, everybody felt like they were going to win the game. And even Malachi Smith is celebrating. He's running down the floor, pointing on his head. And all of a sudden, they make a 3. Baylor hits the 3 within 4 seconds, maybe less than that. And now all of a sudden, it's a 4-point game. And then you look at the next 2 offensive possessions for Gonzaga. They're up against the shot clock on both possessions. They end up taking difficult shots that don't go in. Now it's a 1-point game. And then Baylor takes the lead. And look what happens on the next possession. They get the ball on the side. They run an Iverson cut, and I'm not questioning Mark Few, but in that situation, down 1, you run an Iverson cut, it's a foot race. That's exactly what happened. The Baylor defender got his hands on the balls, and it ends up touching Gonzaga's player's hands, and it goes out. It's just a bang-bang play. Like, it's a foot race off an Iverson cut with the game on the line. I know you want to get some movement. You're trying to get the best possible shot you can get, but on that kind of cut at that point in time in the game, now all of a sudden ball gets knocked out of bounds, and you got to go back on defense. So I think you just got to look at the last 3 offensive possessions in that game. Even going to the last shot, called a foul, could have not called a foul. I actually thought Keontae George played great defense there, not picking up a foul. But I think that, Mark Few's got to go back and watch that tape and look at those offensive possessions down the stretch, and they've got to get that corrected. And like RC said, it's the guard play. But for Drew Timme to be on the bench with the fifth foul that was called, that's extremely unfortunate.
And to your point about the Iverson screen, the pass has to be perfect in that situation.
It has to be perfect. It has to be perfect. And it's a bang timing thing. And if it's not perfect, it's exactly what happens. It's a turnover.
I do want to pivot right here to talk about Keontae George and how, my goodness, there were times tonight, he had dudes in his face and he was just boom. Doesn't look like a freshman. Why has he come in and what's he doing so well, RC, to already establish himself as this impact player almost instantly?
One, he's talented. Obviously, he's a lottery pick. But when you got LJ Cryer and you got Flagler on your team, he doesn't have the pressure on him every night. It's just play. And Coach, I think his interview after the game, Coach just said, hey, defend, rebound, shots will fall. And they will. He's talented enough. He can make shots. He's proven that. He's an elite athlete. But he's got two guys with him. He got two dudes with him that's going to just take pressure off him. He doesn't have to force anything. And then tonight, I think for them to get to where they want to be by the end of the year, I think he'll have to be what we saw tonight for them. And then now it just makes them – they would be pretty much unbeatable at that point. And I'm not saying he's got to go for 20 every night, but he has that type of ability, scoring inside. But if he's defending and making plays, I thought he was just as good on the defensive end tonight as he was on the offensive end. Mm-hmm. He got a lot of deflections, a lot of hands. That one drive late, before they turned it back over and gave it back to him again, he made the last play on that. But the one before that, he got his arm in, got a deflection on that. I thought his activity on the defensive end is what got him going on the offensive end, and then he knocked down some shots. But having those other guys, just let the offensive game come to him, and I think that's what he's doing now.
RC, how about the block out on Timme?
Yeah.
Down there, fronting the post, working his
and drew the fourth foul.
Drew the fourth foul. That was a huge play. We talk about him on the offensive end of the floor, but that play right there on the defensive end of the floor for him, that was one of the biggest plays in the game. He's down there battling, trying to front the post, and it ultimately ends up blocking him out. And Timme takes him down to the ground. That's the fourth foul. That was a momentum-changing play.
You can be as talented as you want, but you have, again, he's a lottery pick, yes, but for him to have those instincts defensively already, you got to love that as a coach, right, Matt?
Yeah, and I think, Coach Drew said it at the end of the game, right? He talked about his character. He talked about his ability. He talked about all those things. But, I just think that he's a winner. And to see that team respond after having their teeth set in by Marquette, to come out there and put that performance out there today, and he goes for 14 in the first half, didn't really score nearly as much in the second half, but made winning plays down the stretch. That says a lot about him as a player.
Yeah.
You usually don't find young guys that defend when they're not scoring. And when he wasn't scoring, he continued to defend. And that was the most impressive thing about his game. I thought it was on the defensive end, not just the offensive end.
Was there anything else that stuck out to you besides the play of Keontae George tonight?
I just thought offensively, I thought the Zags really left some plays out there, especially in transition. I thought there was numerous times in the second half, even late in the second half, where they left points out there on the board where they just didn't convert in transition. They had 2-for-1 situations. I remember one possession, they're coming down. Malachi Smith had an opportunity to get a layup. He was wide open. They just throw a bounce pass in there for a layup. I thought they left so many possessions out there that they just didn't convert. And I think Mark Few will watch the tape and realize that they had their chances in this game. You can't fault their defense. You're talking about two of the best offenses in the country out there playing. The numbers say it. Both teams were competing at a high level on the defensive end of the floor. But I think Mark Few is going to watch that film and realize his team left some possessions out there on the floor.
I agree. The other thing I'd add is they're going to have to get some more stability on the guard play. Mm-hmm. They're not as consistent as they need to be. And just controlling the tempo of the game, getting them in. Offensively, I think they'll be fine. But I do think at some point you got Drew Timmy on your team. Whatever it is, I'm coming down. I'm going to make sure he touched the ball. There's too many possessions that their guards and other guys are just, as a team, guys are feeling the freedom to take those shots. I'm okay with it, but let your best player touch it. And that's the only thing I'd ask. He needs to touch the ball because he's drawing attention. He's going to make the game easier for everybody else. He's an unselfish guy, but they're in too many games and he's not getting enough touches, particularly in critical moments. It happens time and time again. I'm all for freedom and the ball movement. They're number one efficient offense for a reason. They'll be there at the end of the year. But if they're going to get to the ultimate goal and win a championship, you can't have instances like this where he's just not getting the ball. And we've seen that not just tonight. That's happened throughout this early part of the season for them. He needs to get the ball in more of a scoring area for them to be effective.
He's a freaking All-American. And if you're a guard and you want to shoot threes, get him the damn ball.
How easy can it be? Like get him the ball. They're going to double, and I'm going to get open three.
And he's a good passer.
He's a really good passer.
He's a willing passer, too.
Exactly.
Exactly. He's a willing passer.
He's almost too unselfish.
No question.
And for him not to get the ball, I mean, that's something that's going to have to change. And the other thing is, I mean, if you take away Malachi Smith tonight, they're going to have to get some production from their bench.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be some more production. I don't know what's going on. I thought Afton Reed had a lot of potential coming out of high school. I understand he went to LSU for a year and he transferred there. He's been literally a non-factor. He's coming in giving just a few minutes. And I was a huge fan of Malachi Smith coming in. And I think tonight he showed flashes of what he can be. They need more consistency out of him. He's a big guard too. But they just seem like their guards' instincts seem to be more of wanting to score than someone needs to take control of this team and from a leadership standpoint and be more want to be a field general.
Yeah, I think, RC, you bring up a good point, too. Like, just in terms of even Malachi Smith, right? Here's a guy that's getting 20 a game, and I was on the field of 68, doing the preview and talking about him and kind of talked about how I felt like he's an X factor for them. Yep. And you can tell, hey, he's about the right things. He comes in the game. He doesn't look to be, and we're not in their locker room, we don't know, but doesn't look to be complaining or upset that he's coming off the bench. And he was the SoCon Player of the Year last year.
Right.
And he's still trying to figure out, and I felt like tonight was like the first night, okay, he kind of looked a little more comfortable than he's looked all year with this new role. And all these teams across the country, right? I'm sure at some point in time we're going to talk about Carolina and like we're going to dive into, like a player like Nance too. Like it's new for these guys when they go to a different team, their role's different. It's new and they've got to figure it out. But Nolan Hickman goes 0 for 8 in the game. He goes 0 for 4 from behind a 3-point line. Like it's just going to be tough for them to win with those kind of numbers. And even as a team shooting 27% from the 3-point line. It's going to be difficult for them to win. And you can't fault their defense tonight because they defended and they defended at a high level. But, I just, again, I know I'm reiterating my point. I felt like they just left some possessions out there on the floor that I know Mark Few wishes he had back.